Haramai, and welcome to the Whāki podcast, which invites people from all walks of life to converse about various access to equity within the context of Aotearoa. We invite you and our guests today to share lived experiences in an effort to identify common threads within support systems, social networks, and knowledge that uplifts the collective human experience. Kelsey, what's our season 2 question?
So in season 2, we are looking at what does equity and knowledge look like for various communities coexisting within one society. Oh, so good. And today my name is Kelsey and I use they, them pronouns.
And I'm Maluseo and people use he, him pronouns for me.
So we make an effort of not introducing our people because it's not our story to tell. So, kia ora, do you want to introduce yourself, however much you want to share, and your pronouns, please?
Kia ora, my name is Rawinia, and my pronouns are she, her.
Amazing. Oh, I'm so excited.
All right, and so tell us a little bit about yourself as well as the communities that you're connected to. So it doesn't have to be complete, don't like share as little as small as little as small, as little as big as you want. So in terms of communities, you can look at your family, your friends, or otherwise you can look at personal things that you're interested in terms of hobbies. So it could be CrossFit, or it could be any other communities that you believe you add value to, or you believe they add value to you. So only 3.
Okay. All right. So introduce myself. I'm Rawinia. I'm from the far north of New Zealand, and my iwi is Ngāi Takoto and also Tainui. The communities that I add value to or that I'm in, I would say, is my family and my whānau, first and foremost, and also the CrossFit weightlifting community, and I would just say everyone in general, really, like the people who I meet, the people who I am blessed to meet through my own journey. I would say that they become part of my community as well.
Totally echo that. Felt that one as well, actually.
Yeah, I think often it's so easy for us to be segregated by like our hobbies or blah, 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 blah. But it's so true, we are a community with everybody, and how everyone can coexist in the same space is really interesting. So obviously this season we're looking at knowledge, and we're curious if you want to kick us off with what is knowledge to you? What does the word knowledge mean for you?
The word knowledge. Wow. I'm like, this is such a deep question. Of course. It's interesting because when I think of the word knowledge, for me, that's very much a logical way of looking at things through books, as an example. Like when I hear the word knowledge is gained through reading things or through being taught, whereas like as an example, like if I compare it to wisdom, like wisdom is what is gained through trial and error, it's gained through living, it's gained through your journey, it's gained through what is shared through other people and other people's stories. And so that's kind of like how I look at knowledge, and then I suppose the distinction behind wisdom as well. And I suppose the reason why I brought wisdom into it is because for me personally, I get more value out of wisdom than I do knowledge. And so that's why I chose to bring that comparison into the space as well.
And what so do you believe that they have a relationship with each other, or do you believe that, like, because could knowledge be a scatterfolding step towards wisdom, or is it like, how does that play out for you?
Love this question. Yeah, definitely there is a relationship there and an interconnection. And I suppose, like, when I consider myself and my own journey, like, I've definitely been in this process of, yeah, like having gone to university as an example to learn about something, and then the wisdom that's then gained through the application of that thing. Or on the flip side, another way that I've kind of lived my life is like I've gone through these really, difficult experiences, like say, for example, with my depression and anxiety. And so through wanting to understand that more, then I've gone on a journey of then going back to university again to then study psychology as an example, plus other different spaces of gaining knowledge through learning to then be able to make sense of my lived experience. And so definitely there is a interconnection and in a relationship in my eyes, and it's helped me to make sense of my experience. And sometimes too, for me personally, I would say that like 80%, that's quite a high number, but I would say 80% of what I truly value comes through wisdom, more so than knowledge for me personally. Yeah.
Love that.
Do you think that wisdom is transferable between people? Because you've talked about stories, right, and sharing stories. So is there, in your experience, is there any way that wisdom can be shared through conversation? Or does it have to be verbal? Can it be emotional or physical, or any other ways of sharing that with people?
Well, I suppose the first part where you asked, like, can it be shared through people, and like that to me is how I've learned a lot of things. It's through the stories that other people have shared with me about their own experiences with something, and then what they've learned through the process. And then I've taken that learning and then applied it to myself. And so through that storytelling piece, that's where I've then been able to take the wisdom that's been gained by this other person and their own experiences to then support me, so that I don't have to go through that same journey and make the same mistakes, because they've gifted me that wisdom. And then I even look at it from the space of, like, I suppose, like my ancestors and, how they passed down knowledge. A lot of it was passed down verbally through storytelling, through showing as well, right? When you said, can it also be physically? It's like, well, when I consider that, I'm like, well, yes, because it's physically showing our children how to cook a nourishing meal, or it's showing them how to play sport, whatever it might be. It's like through that physicality of actually being with people and showing people the way as well, however that looks, right? Whatever showing the way looks like. Like, to me, that is another exchange of passing on wisdom.
Yeah, you're definitely giving me vibes while you were saying that. I totally agree. Actually, because I really feel I'm feeling into it, and I'm like, yeah, I can totally see how that actually works out. For my nuance of your of an understanding of what you're saying as well. How do you acquire? So how do you personally acquire knowledge? How do you wear knowledge, and how do you move with knowledge? So those are those. So how do you acquire, wear, and move with knowledge? But if that's too long, we can break it down. How do you acquire knowledge? How do you wear knowledge? And how do you move with knowledge? And then in process, to because I feel like if wisdom's the as the heart point for you, it's like how do you wear wisdom? How do you move with wisdom? Also, how do you acquire wisdom?
I would say, how do I acquire knowledge? For me, it's usually like there's a spark and there's a curiosity, and however that might be, it's like someone shares something and I want to learn more about it, and then that for me typically comes, like, if I'm being honest, from Google or looking online. And also too, I'd say more recently, actually asking God as well around, I would say what it is that I need to do here, or what it is that is, what are my next steps here. But the knowledge itself, like in terms of expanding my understanding of things, very simply through the internet, and to sometimes through learning through institutions. I would say I'm one of those forever learners. One of those people who have lots of qualifications. And I can definitely see myself as being that person who continues to keep learning, because I do personally get a lot of value from that. And so, yeah, I believe that we can't, well, for myself anyway, like I feel like I know nothing, if I'm being completely honest. Like, the more that I learn, the more knowledge that I acquire, I'm like, I know nothing.
What does that mean? So what does that mean? Like, can you mansplain that for me? Like, because I feel like everybody says that in different ways. So I'm like, can you please just explain it to us from your point of view? What do you mean by that?
I would say that actually my point of view in that is like, it actually makes me like brings a lot more humility. In like the simplest of terms, it's like, I remember, when you're a teenager and you think that you know everything, and you're like, like, you're wrong, and no, mum, you just don't know, or no, dad, you have no clue, like, I know, like, you just think that you know everything. And then you realize, you're like, oh, okay. No, I don't. Actually, maybe mum and dad was right. Maybe, maybe, and so the older I get, the more that I learn, I'm just like, this world is so big and expansive, and you also don't know what you don't know as well. And so as much as there's that spark and that curiosity, it's like, well, we're only learning a small percentage of whatever is, possible to learn within this earth and, this world. And yeah, it makes me more humble, if I'm being honest, instead of like, I would say it inflates me in terms of, oh, I know lots. For me, it's just like, wow, you really know nothing. You're just like, to me, it's like you're a speck in the universe. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that personally, because for me, it's just like, yeah, well, it's a beautiful thing. It's like I can learn all of these things, and acquire all of this knowledge, and also too, it doesn't change anything really. At the end of the day, I still am who I am.
I'm so thankful you said that. I'm so thankful you said that.
I'm curious, what would you say to like 16-year-old Rawinia that's like, I know everything. What would you now say to 16-year-old Ra? Come on.
And would she even listen? That's probably another question as well. Would she even listen?
Oh, man. 16-year-old Ra. She probably wouldn't even listen. Nah. Probably
She'd be like,
not.
That's nice.
It was like this, like, how would you describe me when I was 16? I was like this on the sly, like, rebel, like, on the outside, like, on the outside I was like really book smart, like teacher's pet, like, you know, was like this really like good girl. And then on the sly I'd sneak out of my house, like out of my room, like go and drink with my friends, and I got away with it. And so what would I say to her? I would probably just say to her that who you are is exactly what this world needs, and you don't have to be anything for anyone.
So cute.
That's all types of healing right now. That's all types of healing. That's all types of healing. And so how do you move with knowledge? Do you feel like the knowledge or the wisdom that you acquire equips you like a superpower and a super armor, or like does it give you this invincibility of sorts? Invincibility, not invisibility. Or does like, you know, like how does acquiring knowledge look and feel for you?
Okay. So like moving as in like when I take it on and I acquire it, how do I move through the world with it? Yeah. For me, it's like, how can I gift it to those around me? And it's not something that I own. It's how I look at it. It's like, okay, for me, when I acquire knowledge and I learn something, like instead of, you know, holding on to it and trying to keep it as my own intellectual property or whatever it might be, it's like, well, how can I give to those around me? How can I support those around me? Because I know that's what I value, and I love supporting people. And if I have the knowledge to gift to another person, why would I not? Like, why would I not? And the way that I look at it is, you know, for me personally, holding on to it is so selfish. And so actually being like, well, yes, I have this knowledge, and yes, I've invested 30 grand into this marketing degree or whatever degree that I have, a few. And how can I share that freely with people?
100%. And were the communities that you were willing to share, were they receptive to your knowledge? Like, did that feel good for you? Like, did it feel empowering that you could share that knowledge back, or did it feel like there was a responsibility and a weight to give it back?
I don't feel like there has been actually, the responsibility and the weight was like my own doing. So
tell us more.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Go there.
Yeah, go there. I would say with that, it's like this hero savior complex, you know, that part of me that just loves to support people and loves to help people. And so then taking on the weight and the burden of everyone else. And, you know, sometimes that has been okay, and then other times what it's meant is I've then burnt out, or I've then gotten sick, or whatever it might be. And so it's reminding myself that I can be selfless and I can give, and also to understanding like what's my actual physical energetic capacity, or if I can't be that person for them right now, like when can I, or who else do I know who could be that person to support them right now. So yeah, the weight and the burden has come from me taking that responsibility and owning that responsibility, and not also to like not allowing them to be responsible for themselves first and foremost as well. It's like noticing actually like, yes, you can be there for that person and you can show up for that person, but unless this person is willing to choose differently, like, or you know, there's nothing that you can do. Like, to an extent, right, you can still show up with love, you can still do all of this, but this is not your responsibility and your burden to wear. You can still love them, but you don't need to carry that weight. Like, that's theirs to carry, unfortunately, as sad as it is, really, until they're ready to like let it go, until they're ready to surrender to it, until they're ready to choose differently. But otherwise, all you can do is just love that person. So
how do you navigate that balance between wanting to be there but knowing that it's not your burden to carry, or your like responsibility to hold? How do you navigate that? Because I think that is the crux of so much stuff. I know for me as well, like, yeah, that's been an interesting journey for me to try and figure out. So I'm curious to see what you have to say about that.
Yep. It's reminding myself that I can't save everyone. Yeah, it's been that. And like that I'm not Jesus, essentially. Like, I can be like Jesus, but I'm not him. And it's really reminding myself that, and that sometimes, I suppose we're all on our own journey. It's that reminder. It's like you can't force someone to walk that journey, but you can inspire them through walking your own path and your own journey and your own, you know, your own walk, really. Like, that's how I navigate that space. It's like, who am I being? If I can be this example for others and show them the way, then I don't have to carry them.
Totally agree. Totally resonating. Because like, to me, the way that I fashioned it as well is like, because every like I totally talk with what you're saying. You can definitely be like Jesus, and because everybody has the capacity to do that, it's actually just a reminder. It's just a reminder of being like, bro, you've got this. Like, and it's like every single time, it's like just waking people up of being like. And if people aren't ready to wake up, I feel like that's why I really appreciate this question, Kels. If people aren't ready to wake up, it's because they're still having to find a lot of things before they can find their inner glory or their inner power or their inner justice. And I'm like, I've found myself at a couple of cross points where I was like, oh my gosh, the answer's right there, like that. And half the time I'm like pushing that kaupapa uphill, and then I realize, bro, we're not ready to have this conversation here. And I'm like, the signs were there as well for me to not engage in that conversation, for me to, and I'm like, I totally ignored it. And when you were talking about the savior complex, I'm like, ooh. I was slowly having a funeral for that. And it's a lovely reminder, because you are right. We're not here to save people. We're here to remind people of their power. And the capacity to actually outgrow season, outgrow, troughs, peaks and troughs. And I'm like, yo, I definitely go into the deep end of gratitude when I perceive myself as going through a trough. I definitely go into the next level of being like, I need to instill gratitude right where I am at. Otherwise, this trough will take me to like next week or next month or next year, and I'm like, I am not in a mood to be riding a trough wave. Totally made that up right now, if that's a thing. But if that's not a thing, we can totally claim that. But I'm like, I am not riding this trough wave.
Yeah. Even like what you just said there, how important gratitude is within those spaces. Like, it's so important. Like, we can get so caught up on what we don't have, in that journey, in that path, in that walk, right? It's like we're constantly focused on what's ahead, or what we want, or what we think that we want. And so we miss everything that's currently here within this space that's actually truly beautiful. And this joy and this abundance that's available to us right now, if we can look at it and be grateful for it, instead of constantly focusing on this space in front of us in our future and being like, well, but I don't have that yet.
It's the it's the buts for me. I'm like, if you got a butt in it, I'm like, oh. I swear, I'm at a point where I'm like, I can hear the cues for me. I'm like this. Every time I use the word butt, I'm like, oh.
Well, just was when you called yourself out on the other day.
Yeah, so those are my two trigger words for me. When it's like a reminder for me that I'm not actually trying to open space. I'm just trying to, limit the understanding of the knowledge bases or it's like, because I find myself, I use just when I'm trying to excuse how little or big it is. Oh, it's just this, or it's just that, and I'm like, nah, don't just it. I'm so thankful, Kelsey, that you can see that, because to me, those two words, but and just, when I'm using them in my language, I give myself the permission to just fall into the realm.
You did it now. To just fall into the realm.
Just fall into the realm.
Yeah.
To fall into the realm.
Yeah.
And it's almost like relearning how I converse with myself and converse with my thoughts and my whakaaro, and how I converse with my articulations of my whakaaro, because that's not, like, to me, that's not abundance, and that's not actually opening up for nuances of understanding. It's like I'm front loading it so that I'm like, oh, we're just having a conversation, Rawinia, record. Like
and in that too, it's like that reminder that our words hold so much power in terms of the reality that we're also creating.
I'm fanning you off for that. Carry on.
Yeah,
you got a fan for this.
It's like, okay, well, how am I speaking? How am I speaking to myself? How am I speaking to others? Are they words? Are they, phrases? Are they things that are uplifting, that are supportive? Or are they things that are creating more harm? And understanding too, whereby that impacts us. And it's not from a place of bypassing, right? Like, I want to put that in there, because I think a lot of people try to bypass, or, these these harder feelings or these negative feelings through just flipping to toxic positivity.
Oh.
You know?
Oh.
And also too, it's like noticing, it's like, oh, okay, well, am I just feeding into this space of, you know, all of these things where I'm minimizing myself, or I'm feeding into all of these things, or am I actually speaking from a place of love, really? You know, like that's where it comes back to for me, is like, if I can speak from a place of love, then the things that I'm saying and the words that I'm saying are going to support not only me, but the people around me as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to go back to kind of what you were saying at the start. And what I heard is like, correct me if I'm wrong too, but the language that you use for yourself is also telling other people what language to use towards you as well.
Yeah.
You get a fan too.
Yeah.
Because if we minimize ourselves, then it's telling other people that they have permission to do that to us as well.
The disrespect started with us, with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked quite a bit about like knowledge outside of ourselves, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like, how do you hold knowledge like in your body, in your mind, in your soul, in your heart? Like, what is knowledge within your body that already exists if you don't look outside of yourself?
Oh, I love that. Knowledge within my body, the way that I look at that is like, my body speaks to me. And so knowledge within my body is noticing physically how my body responds within different situations, different experiences, different environments. And so, like, as an example, like at the end of my last long-term relationship, I had a lot of injuries. I say injuries. You know, my body was breaking down and my body was screaming at me. And to kind of sum it up, my relationship wasn't healthy on both sides. And so it was a very unhealthy environment. And my body spoke to me in so many ways. Like, during that relationship, I ended up getting depression. I ended up like physically experiencing all of these different things. And my belief is that was connected to that relationship. And as soon as that relationship ended, like within a few months, those physical symptoms inside my body had left. And so for me, knowledge inside my body is noticing when I'm with someone, is my body closing off? Is it open? When I spend time with them, does my body feel expansive? Or am I noticing that I'm starting to, you know, get all of these physical symptoms that are telling me that perhaps this person is not a person that is going to support me to be around? And so, yeah, I'd say that's kind of like how I hold knowledge in my body, or the body aspect anyway. That's what kind of came up for me when you asked that question.
The word that's coming up for me is intuition. Like, how do you know that to listen to your body in that kind of way? Because I think often it's easier for us just to like, that's just my body doing the thing. But that connection between mind, body, and soul, what does that look like for you in an intuitive way of just like listening in and finding the connections?
I feel like for everyone it's quite different. So, you know, for myself, one thing that I feel like my intuition or the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it in my body is I get like full body goosebumps. And so it literally, like, you'll see in my arms, like the hair raise on my arms, and it could be so hot that it, you know, like, well, of course I'm not cold, you know, like, so that is like a clear sign and a clear indication for me, that that's what it is, and that's what's speaking to me and telling me, you know, gifting me that knowledge that isn't knowledge that's gained through books. This is the knowledge that it's like, okay, this person perhaps isn't, you know, great for you to be around, or whatever questions that I have that I might ask. So that's how it shows up for me, and everyone else's intuition can be quite different. It can be like, you know, in the gut or whatever it might be. Like, yeah, I don't know. How does it show up for you two?
I am asking people because I am trying to see what happens with other people, so I can understand if those things also happen for myself, because I don't listen. I haven't much listened to my body and put the connection between mind, body, and soul. And it's only been in the last 6 months, you know, when I made this change in my life, and I've kind of been on a journey for that last little while of trying to figure that out, and having reference points for other people is kind of how I'm figuring that out for myself. So I don't have a definitive answer right now, because I just actually don't know.
And that's so understandable, because it's something that, again, that wisdom, right, isn't passed down, because it's something that I would say a lot of people have, you know, if you look at, I suppose, like my Māori ancestors, like, you know, they were beaten for using, you know, their intuition and their instincts, and so, you know, that there wasn't passed down to a lot of people, because you were told that you were wrong for being able to listen to that part of you. So,
and that it wasn't valuable in a colonial context.
Yeah. Well, what's valuable is your mind, right? Yeah. I get that.
What about for you, Milo?
Yeah, totally echo both what you both said, because in some ways I've been dabbling in both those arenas. So I was raised fully immersed in Catholicism from the islands, and that was the most like joyous upbringing I can't fault it, because I fully received the love, I saw the love, I gifted the love. So it was immaculate. Yep, there were all the trauma and the violence and the abuse was 100% present, as well as the love and the joy and the great grace of God. And as I maneuvered over to this side of the world, from the islands, from Rotuma to New Zealand, I was tested, and I was tested a lot, because I wasn't so much tested in terms of not believing in a higher purpose, but I was tested with the realm manifestation of Catholicism, and that's a completely different narrative to what the Bible actually says, and what the Bible actually does, and what the Bible actually. So in season 1, I am very heavily critical of the man's interpretation of the Bible, and by man I'm meaning humankind. And it's not even just the Bible in terms of with Christianity. It's very much every different religion and every different sect cult has done their own damage, and as well as their own love. And to me, I feel like going off what Michael was saying in one of his episodes, he was saying we're just all finding different ways to articulate love in this world, and to deeply articulate love in this world. And I'm like, yeah, I totally believe in that for Kōrero, and I totally believe in the fact that, you know, in certain times and places the Bible is potent, potent. And then in certain times and places the people wielding the Bible was potent as well. And I'm like, I don't hold the mumbai anymore, which is a beautiful place that I'm really happy to be in. And I'm at a point where I can actually ritual, which is also through karakia. I can karakia, and at the same time, for me, I'm like karakia and prayer. Although they have their nuances, it has the same essence of gratitude, of recognizing your gifts in the present. And I feel like, to me, I look at Taoism, I look at Buddhism, I look at a lot of different popularized religions, and they all kind of weave in the same, you know, the same song, just with different instruments. And I'm like, I'm really going back to what you were saying before, on our before we jumped into the recording space, is that we literally can be assholes. We can be assholes with these things, and we can be so righteous and justice with it. And as much as I like, before I got the concept of everything's a mirror of myself, and everything that I perceived was a mirror of myself, I was of the mind, and I convinced my mind convinced me to say that, yep, the violence existed outside of me, and I could see it, and I could feel it, and I could name it and shame it. And I'm like, it was interesting that I couldn't name it and shame it within me as well. And I gave myself this like force field protection that said, I saw it and I didn't feel it and I didn't receive it, and I don't know, I'm not that anymore. And I'm like, oh, spotted, you got it. Like, spotted, you got it. And if it's not the same exact mirror, it's manifested into a different illusion. And I'm like, ooh, dangerous waters for me. And it's an ongoing conversation. But to go back to what you were questioning, it's very much, for me, it's gratitude and karakia and waiata. Like, to me, I love all of our songs, because they're just so potent. Like, they really articulate, for me anyways, the way that songs and prayers that come from our ancestors. It's like, when I can sing the songs and they could sing it back then, and I don't know why this is coming in right now, but I'm feeling really emotional into this. But so, no buts. And when I sing the songs that my grandma sings, for a moment we're singing in the same time, and she's not present in the realm, but time doesn't matter because we're singing the same song. And that to me is the grace and the love that I receive every single time I go into prayer, and every time I go into waiata, because the prayers were weaved in before I was born, and the waiatas were weaved into this realm before I was born. And I can't, if I don't recognize that's love already weaved into this realm, I miss out on that. I miss out on that boat, and I miss out on that gratitude, and I miss out on actually love, and I love the way that you said it, expansion, like love and an expansion. Ra, is exactly where I'm at, where I'm like, if I don't want to see the love in this moment, it's because I really don't want love in this moment. And that's okay. I feel like, for me, I've learned from Kelsey to feel it. If love doesn't exist in this moment, don't run away from it. Just embrace that right now. Te pō is here, and te kore is here. So,
And te amarama will come.
Always. Well, I feel like all of them coexist, and we dabble with the one that we like the most, or dabble with the one that's closest to us, our proximity and our season, because they're just always there. Like, to me, I'm like, the seasons exist with each other, not siloed from each other.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way that I'm perceiving it. What about you guys?
Gosh, I'm just so like, and everything that you shared, I'm like, there was so much in that I definitely agreed with. Yeah, I feel like with the seasons, What do I feel? Kelsey, do you have something first?
I think if we jump into the seasons, like there's elements of one and the other. Like you said, Malu, they're not siloed. Like spring and autumn are kind of an amalgamation of summer and winter, but in different ways. And they have to flow through one to get to the other. And I think that's how, like, if we bring that back to us and to knowledge, then, you know, like, ignorance and knowledge, we have to flow through one to get to the other. And if we can put wisdom down here as well, like we have to throw through knowledge to get to the wisdom.
Amazing.
And vice versa, and vice versa as well, because it's like when you have wisdom, you kind of have to channel it through knowledge. Well, I feel like that's the traditional way, is we've been channeling it through knowledge to spread it out in masses. I feel like there is other ways that we can that people have been exploring with that actually just it's like sensory done. There's no need to be like sensory knowledge, like acquisition, specificities, silos, then spread it. And I'm like, ooh, that I feel like that's the traditional model, or that's the model that we've been fashioned for so long.
Yeah, and even as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, what's the other way? And the way that for me, I was like, it's Aroha, it's love. Like,
yeah.
And see,
through that.
I love
the
how people
through all of them, maybe.
People always like demonize, or from my perspective, let me not put it towards other people. For me, I feel like I always see that people are articulating it in my world that there's such a subjectivity with Aroha, and I'm like, there's supposed to be. Aroha doesn't manifest in one space, in one place, in one time. I'm like, specificity is like, subjectivity is supposed to happen with anything. Like, and I'm like when people, because I've heard conversations around being like, oh, we can't really rely on love because it's too broad, it's too abstract. And I'm like, yeah, and the nuances of the people that adopt love in the room that you're in, that's that's the starting point. If we allow people to embrace the nuance of what love manifests for within their realm, we can actually understand, and we can actually heal and correlate, and actually start to pull out the dots of being like, actually love is massive. But because we stop it of being like, oh no, it's too subjective, we need something more factual based and all of these things. And I'm like, we do for these time and place for facts. And there's also time and place for us to actually sit and simmer in Aroha. And I don't find myself, and that's why I love the podcast, and I love people like yourself, because you actually do that, with the mahi that you do with breath work. I feel like that's the most radical love that you can give your body is ha. And to me, I'm like, the fact that you do that and you facilitate people through that, like, you took me places. You took me places the first time. Like I said, Te Ako Matua. That took me places. Like, and I places I wasn't ready to go, because that, like, if I'm being honest, that just took me to Te Kōrero straight away.
Yeah.
I was swallowed in, and it closed, and I couldn't get out, and it was the most scariest thing ever. Because the sensory feeling of me going into Te Kōrero was real. And then how you pulled us back was so real as well. And I'm so thankful for that. You and your team, thank you so much to April. And what's your other wahine's name?
Medicine, Medi.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora. Shout out to you too.
Yeah. Like, there's so much in everything that you both just shared just then, where I'm like, yeah. Don't know where to go right now, if I'm being honest.
No, well, if I can, sorry. There's one more thing that I wanted to add into that. Me and Kelsey went and sat in with at a church, and we just I closed my eyes because I didn't want my number one sense that I rely on for judgment to judge in that space. So I'm like, let me just remove my sight. So I closed my eyes, and I felt the aroha in the space so much. And the kids were there, like, right, like, as I closed my eyes, there's one girl just came and just held my hand. And in that moment, I felt so loved. Like, in that one moment of that, she didn't have to, she didn't know me. We literally just met all the kids that day. And while I was closing my eyes, one kid was fanning me and was fanning me in the front, and the other kid just came and just like, the way that she held my hand and she just stood with me, I was like, I was having such a like out of this world experience. And then that's when I really was like, yeah, we just have different modalities of meditation. We have different modalities of ritual. And this is this is Christianity's modality, and it might have, done a couple of leaps towards the realm, but I feel like that's also innovation. Like, to me, I'm like, that's innovation, and I know what I got from it. And I feel like everybody goes to church to receive different aroha from God, and that's for their own purposes. So that's the only last bit that I wanted to add to that was I really enjoyed my church experience there, because I knew why I was there. I wasn't there for the politics. I wasn't there for who's up there or who was this. I was there for literally the love and the space in the room. What about you, Kelsey?
Yeah, I was there for connection and for community, because the person that invited us, we went to church on the Sunday and we met him on the Thursday, and it was such an intense dive into that friendship, and so blessed that we got that opportunity. And I was there not because I'm a religious person, but because I wanted to connect with this people in his community. And for me, the connection came through the waiata, because it was a song that I recognised, and I just surrendered and let myself be in the moment. And to be honest, I've never done that in a church before, or in a church setting before, because there's some mama there. But yeah, it was beautiful. And then I had a little person come and hold my hand too. It was so cute. And we had a little kani together as well. It was amazing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think, wow, just like both of you sharing that, your experience and how you were able to connect and feel the love in that space. And actually that love is available to us in so many different spaces, right? When we can feel that or connect in with that, wherever that love is present. And then, and something you said earlier, Malu, is actually how, it's the people who have been the thing which has actually, created a lot of harm in these church spaces, really. And that, to me, that breaks my heart, that there are so many people who have been affected in that way through people's abuse of power. And that abuse of power is in so many spaces, in so many places, and it's so prevalent. And where am I going with this? Essentially, I'm just I suppose it's how can we, actually take responsibility for our power. Actually, that's where I'm going with that. Because I know for myself, in my own journey, that I have gotten into places and positions where I have felt so powerful, and I have abused it, and I have caused harm, and sometimes unknowingly, sometimes from a place of thinking that it's, good intentions, but really it's been self-serving purposes. And so, when I look at power, it's so beautiful for us to be empowered, but then at the same time, it's really just checking ourselves and noticing, are we doing this from a place of self-serving purposes, just to essentially help us to continue to rise in this space, but not taking into consideration how this is affecting everyone else around us. Like, how is this affecting our family and our whānau? How is this affecting our friends? How is this affecting the communities that we're in through us being this way? Because, like, none of this matters if everyone else who is within our community is being affected in a harmful way. So, yeah, I don't know. Don't know where that came from.
That was bomb. That was bomb, because I echo everything that you said. I'm of the belief that if for you to rise to power, you have to demonize or step on somebody else's, like, values or love. I'm like, you've manipulated your power. You haven't manifested your power.
Correct. Yeah. That manipulation piece as well. Like, it's like, you've manipulated your way to get to this space. And it's something that so many of us do, unfortunately. You know, a lot of it's so subconscious. And I didn't think that I was a manipulator for so long. And
Gotta go. The mirror's too transparent today. Gotta go. Like, really, don't stop. Keep going.
You know, when you were talking about pointing the finger and, like, around abuse, like, you know, going back to my last long-term relationship, like, when that ended, I like called him a narcissist, and I called him all these things. And then when I held the mirror up, I was like, oh. You know, like, this is where you're being emotionally abusive. That the way that you were perceiving it was actually, you know, that you're in trauma and you're being hurt by this other person, but the way that you're behaving is emotionally abusive. And that was, like, really hard for me to be able to see, and then see, oh, where else is this playing out in my other relationships? And noticing, actually, it's like, okay, these things that I'm saying because I'm, you know, I might use the word, like, feeling depressed or whatever it is. I'm like, actually, no, this is a form of manipulation. And that's really hard to see because you can't unsee it.
Yeah, and that's the excavating work that I totally commend you for. I totally commend you for, because to me, because I'm aware that, you know, you can only go as far as you're willing to go yourself, and to me, I'm like, you've gone to very much the depths of the transparency in the mirror that you see with, and that reflects the person that you perceive you are, the person that weaves in perspectives. So to me, I'm like, wow, like that, like, did you know that you were gonna do that, or was that a flowy process for you where you literally was just like, oh, mirror, there it is, or you know what I mean? Like, because I'm like that.
It was definitely not something I set out to do. No.
Like, today I'm going to work on all of my dark shadows.
No, it's just definitely been a process, you know, even too, it's like, if I notice, like, with my family, I'm like, why am I frustrated right now? Like, why am I angry? Like, and trying to understand that, because I know that that's not who I am. Like, at the core of it, that's not who I am. When you said, you know, earlier, it's like when you wake up and you are just love, you know, when you wake up, I think you said that before we got onto this recording. I was like, well, that's how we come into this earth. We come into this space as love. So where is this frustration coming from? Where is this anger coming from? Like, yes, they are part of the human experience, but also too, I'm like, is that really you?
And see, only a little bit, little bit of us would actually agree to being like, no, that's not us. Or, if you haven't done a lot of the work of the inner, like the inner standing, you would find another excuse to band-aid this wound.
Yeah.
An excuse outside of yourself, eh? Like, oh no, not my fault. It's because this happened to me, or because being in that victim state.
Yeah, that's it. Or it's the other person, or like that's it. That constant blaming, right? It's like, like how are you also playing? What's your part to play in this dynamic as well through who you're being.
All right, so we've come to our final question as well. Which stories have you archived, inventoried, or placed in the back of your high security vault that you'd like to privilege? So it's kind of like, what's in your far queue?
But okay, can you? I'm going to say the word. Simplify that for me.
Yeah. Kelsey,
in a way that's
Kelsey mansplain.
Yeah, pretty much that. Yes, thank you.
It's like, what are the conversations that you would like to have that maybe society is telling us, no, you're not allowed to talk about that, or those tapu subjects that we don't often talk about, but you want to talk about. What are those kinds of things that you want to bring to the front?
So we don't know your one, but I guess for me an assumption could be, and you feel free to backtrack on this as well. Assumption could be, how do we relate and reconnect with God in a new way, and in a way that doesn't diminish the past, but it also really uplifts what the potency of the love with God could be in this new online digital space, because I feel like everything's going online, everything's going digital, and I don't see a lot of love in that space because everything's coded by the man. So it is I see the online space as another form of manning, and yeah. So these articles, or this thing, what is that thing? It's like something of mass destruction, but it's like what's that quote? And it's like something of mass destruction. Do you know what does anybody know what that?
No.
Okay, I'll send you the thing. But yeah, okay. It's around that space.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely say that that's been something that's coming up for me around wanting to speak about, and I understand how much mamai and pain there is around God, especially for people who did grow up in the church, and that's not something, that hasn't been my experience. And so, what's actually been hard for me is to build and cultivate this relationship with God, and then for people to then tell me that I'm wrong because they've had this abusive experience when they were children. And so and that brings me pain, like that they've had that experience, because my experience is just pure love, and that hasn't come from being in the church. And so I definitely know for myself that I would like to speak more about it, and it's having the courage to do so, but also I feel like, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's like trying to do so with some sensitivity as well, in some ways, in understanding people's pain. But also too, for me, it's like, why would anyone not want to feel this abundance of love? Like, that's how I look at it, because for me, if we look at this path that a lot of people are on in terms of truth seeking, I've gone down so many different paths. Honestly, so many different paths. And it's, for me, it's arrived at this place. Like, I've gone down, you know, having learned about different types of, you know, a little bit of Buddhism, or, you know, like so many different personal development paths, like self-love paths, self-worth paths, like all these different, you know, spirituality in different ways. And, you know, and again, this is my own experience. And for me, it's like, well, God's love is like no other. And the fullness that I feel when I'm sitting with God, I'm like, well, I just know that I'm worthy, and I know that I'm loved, and I know all of these things. That when I don't have that relationship with it, well, with God, like, then that's when all of those other, you know, negative thoughts come into my head that, oh, there's something wrong with you, or you're not good enough, or all of these things. And I'm like, you know, these things that so many people struggle with. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't we choose that? And I can see why, because it's a pain. And I get that. So definitely that. And even so with that, I'm still unpacking a lot of things and traversing a lot of spaces around it, and speaking to different people, you know, who have had their own journeys around their own relationship with God, because I believe that that's important to, you know, ask people who have the wisdom, ask people who have knowledge in different ways to understand their perspectives. And also to, you know, even through all of that, I can keep coming back to asking God and building that relationship and that communication with him. So that's definitely like a big one for me. And it feels, it feels like I'm being pulled into that path. Lean
in. So much easier to say than to do, but lean in.
I know. Especially like I would say within like the taboo spaces of deliverance. And so, Mahu might know a bit more around what deliverance is. So deliverance is really, we're going to go there.
Well, come on, Kelsey. Kelsey needs to be educated.
It's like casting spirits and demons out of people. And I have actually done that for one person. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and it was presented to me when I first came back to New Zealand, and through my own journey as well, through a lot of I'm going to call it like new age practices. Like, I've had lots of things be pulled out of me, but because it wasn't from a place of God, then if you read the Bible, it comes back 7 times worse. And so 7 times the number of spirits or demons come back into your body, because it's not coming from a place of God. And so a lot of my work has been, you look at it, shadow work. It's helping to pull all of these things out. And it's not to say that depression isn't real and anxiety isn't real and all of that, but I know for myself that the more that I've been on this journey of God, that a lot of those things that I've experienced, like, just haven't been present. Like, it's like I've become so much kinder, I've become so much more loving. And so yeah, I'm aware that I have this, or God's gifted me this gift, and it's scary. It's really scary, if I'm being honest. And it's not a space that a lot of people speak about really openly, especially in the, you know, what I am aware of. It's a lot more light and fluffy, and it's not so much in the space of like what is essentially called spiritual warfare. So yeah. Yeah, that was a bit of a bomb, Kelsey.
No.
I'm like, wow, I've never heard of this before.
No, yeah. I've been in proximity to when the spirit fills the room, or embodies people in the room. And that's I can totally agree with you. It is a scary space. Like and especially if we're not po with our aroha, and how that aroha is being you know, so Aroha is created. You know, Aroha was created by, and it doesn't matter what you believe in. If, like, I guess to me, it's more so on what your heart is, like where your heart is sitting with it. So people call it God, you know, Hare Krishna, all of these other things. But for me, I'm like, if your heart is po, like the spirits will definitely, well, your heart will guide you into how to move, like to navigate the spirits, like in spaces and places like that I've been in proximity to. If your heart's not po, it will embody you, or it will give you the worst of what you're wanting or what you're fearing, and you don't know. Like, because the way that the Bible's being depicted to me is that the Bible only uses old toys to mess with you. So all of your old insecurities that you have no idea about and you thought you forgot about, boom. And I'm like, I am so thankful that I've never been personally been thrown into that whirlpool, but I totally receive you, and I hold space for you, my sister, for any time, because I know how that's been, I've witnessed the reality of that. So when you say that it is scary, I totally uffy, and if I know that you don't need validation, but for me, I can tell you 100% that I know exactly what you're talking about from my nuance. But I totally receive you for everything that you just said, my sister.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, and even when you're talking about like the heart, right? Like, this is where it's so important for us to take care of our hearts and to just notice where we do feel vulnerable, and actually where are we seeking that support to ensure that we are looking after our hearts in whatever way that might be, you know, be that through asking through support, through friends, through family, you know, just really ensuring that, you know, all those insecurities, all those things that you know, all these lies that you have inside your head, like, we're not continuing to feed those lies. You know, we're just continuing to feed, you know, essentially all the beautiful parts of like who we are.
So good.
There you go, Kelsey.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Man. So good. Thank you so much.
We went really deep.
We did. I was like, whoa, here we go. So good. So good. Thank you so much, honestly, Rawinia, for coming through and sharing your story and being willing to be vulnerable with us as well. We really, really appreciate it, and yeah, just bloody amazing.
I feel really grateful that you two are just willing to go there, like willing to go to those spaces, and the space that you hold is so beautiful and so safe. And so I just really want to, you know, acknowledge the both of you in that, because, you know, I know for myself that, you know, I need to feel safe to be able to express myself and be honest, and yeah, you two hold that really beautifully, so thank you.
Thank you. Well, to quote your book, you are never alone. You are not alone. And if that is something that you want to plug in, feel free to plug in any of the love that you've actually weaved into this world, because that's how I've received your book. Very much a love that I've received, and I also hold space for you to move away from your book as well, because I know that kind of like the conversations we've had, that was something that you weaved into the world, and it might have been the end result of a journey. So for me, I'm really holding space as well for where you are in terms of who you are right now in comparison to where you've released this love potion into the world. So if you wanted to plug in any other love potions you've plugged into the world, or otherwise if people want to connect with you, how will they how are they best to connect with you?
Love that. Best way to connect with me right now is on Instagram, so Rawinia.Judson. I said to both Malu and Kelsey before we jumped on this call that I'm in this space of deep surrender and trust, and what that means is I've also deleted my website. I've just deleted everything that exists online other than my Instagram, and so that is the best space for people to connect with me now and moving forward. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, and so we started with our plug-in. So will you join us in with saying "fuck you"? And all right, the fuck you,
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
fuck you, the fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
See you later, whānau.
Ka kite.
Bye.